Evening, everyone. I'm Paul Farish. I'm the Director of Parks Planning with the city. I was going to set things up, but I think, Nicole, you've done a very good job in council. You've doubled down with a lot of detail in terms of where we're at. I don't want to hold back from actually flipping to the next slide and getting into a proper presentation, so I won't say too much more. I will just focus on one thing, and that is to note that we're not just talking about physical change in the park. It's very easy to fixate on design boards and images that we're seeing in the presentation or on the boards. But I like to think of this as a program for the park over the long term. It's about certainly physical change that's appropriate to the park, but we have from the very beginning been talking about maintenance of the park, keeping it in the right quality and condition that we all want it to be. We've been talking about the ways in which community, Indigenous partners, institutions can help steward the park. We've been talking about having dedicated staff in that park every day, thinking about its best success, its best way of being for all its many constituents. So we will talk through, before we get to the design, we're actually going to talk a little bit about that stewardship approach. I want to highlight that, Councillor, as something that we think is equally important here. The donation that we're talking about is significant in its size, but it's also significant because of that long-term perspective and what we can all do together. So as always, I appreciate anyone coming out on a rainy night to a public meeting. Thank you for spending your time and your energy, and I look forward to the questions. But we're going to go through quite a few slides of detail, because detail and clarity right now is super important.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. So as Paul said, we are quite a big team, and we work with within the city and with a large consultant team. We, in addition to the project team, which lives within the Parks and Rec division, we work across heritage planning, urban forestry, our colleagues in EDC, which is economic development and culture. We work with parks operations. So a lot of touch points with different city divisions who are all very much on the team and working through all of these questions with us. We have a consultant team who you'll hear from Janet Rosenberg in studio today. They're the lead landscape architect on the project, and they have sub-consultants who work underneath them. We also work very closely with the councillor's office. We're very happy the councillor is here today, and as well as with other city divisions like the TTC. Obviously, the TTC infrastructure runs right under the park. So working across quite a large team. I know many of us have been here before. Just to recap, the project came to the city in 2024. The city was approached by the Weston family with a very generous and exciting opportunity through this offer of a $50 million capital donation to improve the park and an additional stream of funding to enhance maintenance and operations within the park. So all told, a very generous offer of a donation. And in response to that, City Council directed staff to advance the project along a couple streams of work. So in March 2025, so just about a year ago, staff were directed to negotiate and sign a first phase donation agreement that has covered the work to date, and to negotiate the key terms of a larger donation acceptance agreement. And so that is a lot of the work that we've been doing that is in the staff report, and that work, that terms sheet that's at the end of the report outlines sort of the terms of the donation. That will go to Executive Council, and then it will go through to City Council. This is not working. Perfect. Okay, so that's where we are. We are, in addition to working through that phase of that council reporting schedule, we're also kicking off our third phase of design engagement, which is where we are tonight. And so we are working through this stage to really refine the design concept. Like Nicole said and Paul said, quite a lot of work has been done. And we are very excited to share with you. As Nicole mentioned, it's a long presentation, but a lot of detail. And I really hope that the presentation answers a lot of questions. And there's a lot of great new detail in the presentation. I'm not allowed to touch clickers because this is not working. And every time I do this, clicker stops working. Does this work if I do this? No. Okay, got it. Okay, I'm just gonna use those. Yep. Okay, great. Park, we know it's a 5.2 hectare park. It's located just north of the Ontario.
Sorry for interrupting you, but I'm not sure if you
And it
are
was first
doing
opened in
a
18.
presentation because
It
the
is
people that
leased
is
to the city
online is
on
not
a
watching.
39-year lease. So the University of
I-
Toronto owns the park. The city leases the park under a long-term lease. It is designated as a city park in the parkland strategy, and so that means it attracts a wide variety of users from across the city due to its size, location, um, the opening of the TTC station within the park. So it attracts a very wide usage from across the city. There's many assets that are currently in the park. We've talked a lot about that. The trees, of course, being the key and most loved asset within the park. There are picnic benches, a perimeter running trail, a bottle filling station. There is some public art, and then the TTC station that I mentioned. The project is being guided by quite a few city policies and strategies. And we see this as a really great opportunity to implement some of the strategies that have come into place and the policies that have come into effect since the last round of upgrades. So there was a round of upgrades that happened, they concluded in 2019, but a lot has changed within the city since then, within the planning context. And so this is also an opportunity to that change. Going back to the official plan, it gives us an opportunity to protect and enhance and expand the parkland. We do look a lot to the parkland strategy, which really looks towards the future growth, particularly in the downtown, and how that impacts provision and park usage. And we also look at TO Core, which outlines opportunities for investment within the Queen's Park precinct, and that strategy identifies the park as having very prominent both provincial and citywide interests given its location. So thinking through growth, this map is pulled out of the parkland strategy, and it maps sort of the pressures on parks throughout the city. And it looks at the access that people have to parkland depending on, it's marked by census dissemination block, and so the access that people have to parkland depending on the number of parks available and the density in the neighborhoods. And so the strategy maps out that anything less than 12 square meters and below is considered low, square meters is very low. So when we're looking in these areas of the downtown, them fall within that low to very low range, and Queen's Park falls within that range as well. Strategy, which I'm not going to go through as much as I would love to because I find it fascinating, but you can find it online, also looks towards future pressures on parks. And so we know that there's going to be increased pressure on the parkland that we do have. There will be higher density and vertical growth in a lot of these neighborhoods. And so we're looking to do more with the parks that we have. Perfect. And so Parks and Rec uses a number of criteria to think about, is that showing? Yeah, to think about what makes a high quality park. And in the case of Queen's Park North, we that a high quality park looks to these overlapping uses within the park and a variety of different users and visitor experiences within the park. And so a way to achieve this is through looking at both what we're thinking through as the park and the heart. And so the park really looks at how to protect the trees and the ecology of the park, as well as the softscape improvements that we've been discussing. Whereas the heart looks at bringing, more activity and visitor experience opportunities into the center of the park. And so we look at these overlapping uses as a way that we can think about the needs of the park both today and for future generations. And so the vision statement for this project, which we've worked through, and we've worked through in a few rounds of engagement, really does articulate some of the vision that's in that parkland strategy, and really looking at those expand, improve, connect, and include. And that is how we are thinking through some of this process. The park is really meant to support well-being. It's meant to support quality of life, particularly as we talk about these denser neighborhoods where more people will need more access to green space. We also heard through our last round of engagement that the principals needed to include cultural and natural heritage. So cultural heritage was always included in the vision statement for the park, and it's always been included in the way that the team has looked at the park from the very beginning, but we heard loud and clear that it wasn't reflected through the principles. So that has been added as a guiding principle to the project since our last round of engagement. So on that engagement, we saw you last. There's probably a photo of this room there. Between the first two rounds of engagement, we've spoken to just about 3,000 people, and we've heard a range of feedback. We have heard feedback that people want absolutely no change in the park. We've heard feedback that people are interested in some change in the park under very specific conditions, and we've heard feedback that people are very supportive of the proposals that have been put forward. So we have heard a very wide range of feedback, as well as, of course, those priorities and strategies that I've mentioned from the city. We've always had multiple priorities feeding into this concept design, and so we've heard quite a lot of feedback. I won't go through this chart. It is at the back, but really what this chart seeks to outline is the key themes that we heard through the engagement process to date and how the design has responded to that. So I would encourage you to, these will be available, of course, online, or check out the chart in the back if you want to read through in detail. And the JRS team will be walking us through a lot of the detailed changes. But I am very excited for you to see the design tonight, because I do think that there's been quite a lot of change that responds to a lot of what we've heard so far. I'll pass it over to Alex.
Thanks, Shannon. So I'm going to run through a recap of the opportunity in front of us in terms of the donation and the new proposed operating model. Let's see if this works. All right, so the key terms of the donation agreement are outlined in the staff report, which is available online. But to quickly summarize, donation up to $50 million for the revitalization of the park. The city will oversee the design, finalization, and capital delivery of the work. The donation envisions a new shared operating model for between the city, University of Toronto, and the donor. This donation also requires minor amendments to the reference 999-year lease with the University of Toronto for the use of the property. And like all our park partnership projects and donation projects, any donor recognition will be signed off by the general manager and consistent with how we do this across the park system in Toronto. All right, so what's the new shared stewardship model? So it's a new operational model built to achieve the visions and the principles established for the park. It will leverage significant additional funding from the donor. Preliminary estimates for the additional funding are approximately $2.15 million per year for an initial term of 20 years. So this funding would allow U of T to perform enhanced maintenance and operations for the park, which go beyond what is typical for a park like this. It would allow for a dedicated executive director to be created as a park's lead to curate appropriately scaled and funded programming. The new model also makes space for future Indigenous involvement through a leadership circle and space for community and neighboring institutional voices through an advisory board. So all told, the new model results in improved assets, natural areas, support for new and existing uses. It creates a maintenance and operations model created for Queen, grounded in the vision and the principles. An executive director providing additional eyes and attention on the park. This brings intentionality and coordination to the park, which does not exist today. And at a basic level, more money care of the park than exists today. So how does it actually work? So starting at the left, a steering committee between the University of Toronto, the donor, and the city will oversee maintenance, operations, and financials. This group will hire and oversee an executive director and also oversee third-party operations for something like the cafe. It would also include an executive director will be brought in on board to act as the park lead provide leadership, working to bring the vision and the principles of the park to life. They will be a central point for the park, coordinate and integrate all park activity, including operations and programming. Noted at the top in a dotted line is space for an Indigenous leadership and stewardship circle. The particulars and scope of this space and relationship is still to be confirmed based on ongoing conversations and engagement. We also have outlined a specific space for an advisory board, including community, neighbor, expert, Indigenous representation at the table. This is to ensure a process for ongoing input and conversation. The board will advise the executive director, providing vision, leadership to the park, advice on things like programming principles, interpretation, visitor experiences, measuring success, providing subject matter expertise to complement and University of Toronto, as well as other things. The detailed terms of reference for this group are still to be determined over the next coming months. So really quickly zooming in on the steer around responsibilities. So the city retains oversight of what can happen in the park and will provide core municipal services. The city will continue to represent the public interest and will become the ultimate owner of new park assets. Bylaws and park laws continue to govern the space. The university will take on enhanced maintenance operations of new revitalized park elements, in addition to providing the support for the executive director. And the Weston Foundation will provide funding for capital improvements, funding for operations and maintenance, funding for programming. So taken all together, what does it all mean? We're excited because all told, it sets the park up for long-term success. So it'll allow for the vision and principles to be realized not just immediately following revitalization, but for many years to come. I'll hand it back to Shannon.
Thanks, Alex. So it really is an exciting opportunity, and it really is an opportunity. I don't think the city often gets these kind of opportunities or offers. And more than the design, we heard later, even from our very first engagement round, that maintenance was something people were very focused on. The park was not being maintained to a standard that the public was happy with, that the community was happy with. And this opportunity really offers, in addition to some special design elements, an opportunity for enhanced maintenance, and I would say for care of the trees in a really proactive way, in a way that we're not currently doing. And so it is a really special opportunity if we think about what we love about the park, thinking about the trees and the opportunity to really invest in the trees now, but also the future of the trees and the succession planting of the trees. So just wanted to say thank you, Alex, and really note that it is a special opportunity. But there's still a lot of work to do. So that's where we are today. We are excited to share back the concepts and developed since we last spoke to you. There is still this testing and analysis and refinement phase that we're in, and we're in that starting today, and lots more work to do as well. Continuing to do due diligence and work on some of the feasibility around some of the specific elements, like the tree walk that we've been asked about, and Janet's team will get into more details on that tonight. Working really closely with our technical colleagues within the city, so working with our heritage colleagues and our forestry colleagues and our operations colleagues to really look at these elements and see how they work and how do we operationalize them. Looking at the impact, so the tree impact analysis, a forestry management plan that would look at not just the design phase, but also looking at a forestry management plan that would see the park into the future, which is also a very special opportunity. And so we're also looking through the statement of cultural significance, which is a heritage statement that helps shape the direction of the park and the design directions for the park, as well as looking at the food and beverage feasibility and analysis. So although we've said we would like to bring a food and beverage offering into the park, we're still working through a feasibility analysis to understand what is the right scale and what's the right sort of business model that would need to exist to be successful. So that's some of the work that's currently happening in addition to this meeting and meetings that will happen throughout the month. So we will work our way through a series of meetings that are planned between now and April. We will, as we said, be at Executive Committee next week and City Council on March 25th. And then our intent and our goal is to continue engaging. So past this standard concept an engagement phase, we would like to continue engaging. We would, of course, plan and like to give an update on the final design concept, but we'd also like to continue engaging on the stewardship model that Alex has laid out, and starting to put together the framework and the terms of reference for that. So all of that will be, we are in the process of building out what that plan will be, but rest assured we intend to be in conversation now and for a while to come. So I think with that, I'll turn it over to JRS, and the survey is live on the website, so you can visit the project website anytime between now and April 2nd.
Thank you. Hi, everyone, and thank you for being here this evening. My name is Jessica Hutchin, a partner at Janet Rosenberg in Studio, the landscape architects on the Revitalization project. With me tonight is Todd Douglas, who you'll hear from shortly, as well as an incredible team, including Thomas from Cohen and Master, our consulting arborist, as well as Tess from Dugan Ecology. And first and foremost, I think we want to take a look back at some of our early research into the cultural heritage. And today, Michael McClellan from ERA Architects is with us as well. He's been working on the project with us since the very beginning. He is a heritage conservation and planning specialist and was actually part of the 2015 project as well. So lots of wonderful knowledge to share tonight. Been working on the project with Terrence of Trophic Design, our Indigenous design consultant. And together, they've really been looking to craft a clear picture of the cultural heritage of the special place. And then together, with the entire team, we've looked at how do we ensure those themes and everything we've learned can inform the proposed design and strengthen the sense of place that is found here today. Sorry, am I going? Click there, okay. Apologies, great. So Queen's Park is a special place. It's located within a cluster of Toronto institutions, some of which, University of Toronto, the Legislative Assembly, lots of cultural institutions like the ROM, the Gardner, and the RCM. So when we began the project, we really wanted to truly understand the forces that have shaped this place over time. So we immediately engaged with heritage, Indigenous, and tree experts early on. And we really wanted to ensure that that expertise informed the design. So I'm going to pass it over to Michael now and take us through a bit of that for you this evening.
How's that work? Okay, that one. Okay. Hi, my name is Michael McClelland. We're the heritage consultants on this project, and actually we worked on the earlier work at Queen's Park, and we've also restored some monuments at Queen's Park. So we've been doing quite a bit of work there for maybe 20 years. The previous work, we prepared a heritage impact assessment. That's what we usually do. When you do a project, you prepare a heritage impact assessment, submit that to the city, and sort of say, here's what we've identified as heritage, here's what we've identified as heritage value, and here's how we're assessing it, and here's what we're proposing to maybe alter or leave it alone, whatever. And that's what that first document did. The document in the middle here is called the historic context statement, and that's what we've done for this second phase of work, because what we really want to focus in on the values of the site, the values as we understand them, and as a way to allow the design team to figure out how they can respond to those values and how they can respect them. We've from that been asked by the city to prepare a statement of significance, which is a kind of a legal document, which basically says here's the nuts and bolts of what is really significant in the park. The middle document is available on the city's website. And what am I doing wrong? Okay, this is kind of a dense piece, but what we did was then group all the history, amazing amount of history. There's the historic context statements, about 60 pages or so, under 4 themes that we actually thought there's always been a history to these themes. There's always been something past and something that's is happening now, and we can make connections to those things. No, backwards. There we go. So the first theme was people, and people may think parks have always been around, but in the 1850s, 1840s, and 50s, they started to understand that public parks were something that needed to happen. And they started in England as a public park movement. And this was the first municipal park in Canada. first municipally run park in Canada, 1860. And it was opened almost the same time as Central Park. And the idea about public parks was a very strong program, was to sort of say, um, parks are for everyone. Everyone, no matter what economic group you came from, you could come to a public park and have a nice. There were also then because it became part of a public realm, you could actually speak out at a public park. You could demonstrate at a public park. You could have all your friends appear at a public park for certain. And so that was a really important gesture, an idea about publicness and public realm that we want to repeat within this scheme. Okay, I'm sorry. You're great. You're magic. The second theme was nature, and nature is cultural. So we want to understand the cultural values of the nature on the site. And if you look at the stereographic pictures up in the top left, that corner up there, those are photographs from university at the opening of the park. So the one on the far left side is Queen's Park North. The one on the image B is where the legislature is now. But when you look at that, you can actually understand that what was there was not a kind of virgin forest. It was a forest that had already been heavily manipulated and managed in different ways. There's a lot of, we can learn a lot from just examining that image very carefully. If you look at the lower image on this left-hand side, you see an image from the 1960s, I guess, and you can actually pretty much count every tree in the park in the wintertime. So we know a lot about the trees that exist in the park. We also have an amazing arborist survey from the 1930s, where all the diameters of the trees are identified and the species are identified. So we know a lot. But the nature, again, has been a continuous thing. So now we think about bird roots and the fact that this is a valuable piece of the ecology of the city, and it does amazing things. There we go. The third theme was governance. And this is a really interesting theme in this perspective, and I think Terence will talk about it as well, because they overlay. When we did our study, we called it a two-eyed seeing approach, which was basically seeing from both an Indigenous lens and from a colonialist lens, and basically try to balance out those things and make sure we're respecting every value. So Terence can tell you some stuff about this particular site. I'll say that what's interesting about this site from a governance perspective is that there had been a college proposed to be built in where the legislature is now, which was only for Anglicans. And it was the family compact. It was called King's College. And a fellow named Robert Baldwin, who's a pretty prominent Canadian hero, said, no, we're abolishing King's College. We're not going to allow that. And we must have a non-denominational called University College. And so that's where this whole idea, and then he went forward to develop an idea about responsible government that Canadians could represent themselves. And so there's a really strong, powerful idea about governance that's directly related to this site. And it seems a little inappropriate, I'll just launch into this, it seems a little inappropriate that we have a royalist statue in the middle of it. And the fourth slide is the idea about welcoming, that everyone's welcome to the site. And so you talk about amenities, and on the bottom of the slide, you see the bandstand in the middle of the park. The bandstand was there. There are public washrooms under the bandstand. And so there's a whole history of things that have happened on the park that have been amenities for the park. The slides on the top are an absolutely stunning, amazing grouping of maps, plans for the development of Queen's Park. Not one of them ever got executed. Everything was there was a war between the university, the city, a variety of other people. It took ages to get this park going. It was opened by King Edward VII, or Prince Edward VII. But it has in it many different things. If you look through these images, there was a proposal to build a botanical garden. The university wanted to build a botanical garden on the site. And actually on the earliest slides, there was the university was described simply as an experimental farm. There was no university, it was a farm. And there's another slide I point out where University College is etched in pencil because that's where it was going to go when they got rid of the legislature, the King's College building. So the idea that there's always been an evolution. We don't call it a designed landscape. We call it an evolving landscape. There's always been different iterations of have happened here. And these are the first iterations that have continued ever since its development in 1860. So now I'm going to pass this to Terrence. Is that okay?
Can use the clicker. Oh, let's see. I can use the clicker. Thank you, Michael. So Tenzi, good evening, everybody. My name is Terrence Radford. So I'm going to continue to maybe pick on the statue a little bit, but we'll see how that goes. So the Haudenosaunee, the Wendake, and the Mississauga have a long-standing relationship with this region and with the land that Queen's Park stands on. But the site carries layered histories, so both Indigenous and colonial, and the team recognizes that and seeks to balance that with the proposal of the concept that you're going to see. So Queen's Park has functioned as a democratic space for generations. It is also a place where First Nations and Indigenous communities have gathered to speak truth to power. That's due to its relationship to the legislature building. Rather than viewing the park only as a formal colonial landscape, we have reframed it through the lens of the historic Mississauga Council Fire. These are places of governance, dialogue, and community responsibility. So the central axis is being reinterpreted not as a tool of colonial order, but as a connector, linking spaces of gathering, dialogue, and shared governance. At its heart, the site becomes a place for community, ceremony, and expression. So this shift establishes an Indigenous framework for understanding the land where governance is relational, where community is central, and where land is a teacher, and public space is a shared site of responsibility. So we've developed an overall framework that embeds Indigenous presence across the entire site, not as add-ons, but it's foundational to the work we've been doing with JRS. As part of this, we're looking at opening the center of the park by relocating the King Edward sculpture. It was to be removed from a space of dominance along that central axis and create a space for gathering instead. We're introducing space to support ceremony, protocol, and governance. We're looking at restoring the understory to species health, to support habitat for non-human relations, and enable land-based learning. We're creating an all-season workshop space that supports stewardship, cultural programming, education, and intergenerational knowledge exchange. We're looking to integrate language and teachings along a potential tree walk through interpretive elements grounded in Indigenous knowledge, storytelling, and developed in partnership with the nations. And we're exploring a shared governance model to support meaningful participation by First Nations and Indigenous communities to support in the decision-making for the future of the park. So together, these interventions are looking to reposition the park as a living site of governance, education, and relationship. I'm going to pass it to Todd. Jessica.
Thank you. So just quickly building on what we just heard, by also studying the physical characteristics of the park over time, we can see that it is a place that has experienced change since its inception, and in fact, far beyond before that as well. You know, it once had more crisscrossing paths. It once had a bandstand and washrooms. So we also really want to think about our proposal today in terms of how it brings back some of those elements, how it introduces some new layers and new ways of understanding and relating to the land. And I'm just going to go really quick here. So taking all of that information from our team, we start to ask ourselves really critical questions before we start designing. They're listed here. I don't want to take time reading them because I want to get to the fun stuff here. So I'm going to pass it over to Todd, but happy to chat about this after.
Thanks, Jess. I too have a very long speech that I'm going to try to shorten to make sure we can fit it in the time remaining and get to the feedback and the questions. So I'm probably going to rip a little faster than I intended, but we'll show the park as it is today, and then we show our proposal kind of mapped underneath the canopy. And I'm going to remove the trees here kind of graphically so we can see the changes kind of on the ground plane. And this is also on the boards in the back if people want to study them in more detail. But tonight, I am going to try to focus on the new things and the changes. Some of the things that were kind of presented in the last meeting remain relevant. So you just might not see them on the screen today, but we brought some of those images in person on the boards, and they'll be available online if you want to look at them. So when we're talking about kind of refinements and kind of responses to the feedback we've heard so far, I kind of loosely grouped them into two buckets. There's change, and then there's new detail that have been developed since that are both incorporate that feedback and requests for certain detail to be provided. So here we're showing the kind of the softscape as it exists today on the left. Then there's the concept that you saw in November in the middle, and then the revised concept compared on the right. And so the darker green is where we're introducing those restoration zone planting that's intended to create the conditions to grow the next generation of kind of century-old trees. And it replaces lawn. And I think in our previous discussions, we heard how important the lawn was. And so we've tried to dial in the amount of restoration planting, putting it around the trees that kind of need that care most, while providing lawn in the areas where it's kind of most used and loved. The hardscape is about the same. The permeable or the up slightly as we improve Wellesley to kind of improve the connections into the park. And the number of structures goes down. So we've removed the kiosk entirely, and we have the kind of cafe washroom and the workshop building. And we have details on that tonight. So I'm happy to talk through how people might use this park with you in great detail after the meeting. But we'll start looking at the kind of design content that I think we're eager to share. We loosely define the park, as Shannon mentioned, into the heart and what we call the park. So the park is the treed and grass area. The heart is that kind of space in the middle with the horse. We'll start with the park, and we'll look at kind of the changes to the planting communities. We'll look at the tree walk, and we'll look at the commemorative garden, and we'll look at the workshop. So the active loop, the concepts, they remain meeting, double them up to try to keep it focused on the changes. We are showing how we're simplifying the understory planting. So white is lawn here. So you'll see more lawn is being retained in the updated proposal. Understory has been simplified to a more meadow-like condition throughout. In our previous meeting, we showed a very specific tree kind of in understory, and in response to like some patterns and how people use the park. And we're making adjustments to certainly care for these trees, but also kind of maintain the patterns of use that exist today. So this is the largest oak in the park, and you'll see some kind of scientific devices on it. That's part of our sonic tomography, our arborists' sonic tomography equip what's been described to me as an ultrasound for trees, and they're able to see inside and how much kind of wood remains. And the results are very encouraging, and so that was good news for us. And it's also kind of allowed us to make some long-term plans where we're looking to put some mulch around the base of this tree. It in turn is then surrounded by lawn, and then the understory is further away, often during the day. Kids and families use the lawn to move towards the garden. We're looking at maybe some understory protection measures when we are introducing new understory, that there could be rocks that double as seating or tow rails or kind of custom wooden fences that maybe temporarily is installed to let that planting establish. We're looking at the tree walk, and I think people had kind of questions about how it would work. So I wanted to provide this image of what it might look like to stand to the south of it and it's intended to be kind of fully accessible. So it's these shallow slopes that get up to a height kind of tall enough to allow people to walk underneath of it. So you could kind of meander through the trees, but the ground plane also remains open and the sight lines remain open. So we're showing an alignment here in some detail, and this board is also available in the back if people want to study it closer. But you'll see the alignment of the tree walk and how it responds to the tree protection zones. The tree protection zones, as mentioned earlier in the tree bylaw, are kind of a zone that the city kind of designates around each tree. And we're trying to show how we're weaving this around the tree protection zones. And when it does go through a zone, it does so in the air. And we're envisioning kind of slender pillars, and we show the pillars as a range because we know we're going to do kind of route exploratory work, and the intention is to work with our arborists and kind of airspade into areas that we need support, and then should we find a route, that there's flexibility to just move the support and leave the route in place. In areas of low height, there's potential to do some kind of small earthworks to reduce that kind of confined space. In this case, we're kind of showing maybe 2 Norway maples that would be nurse logged to be moved into the learning forest. The commemorative garden now has significant more detail. So this is the area to the south of the heart, and is kind of made up of a series of garden rooms. So there's something that we call the tapestry garden, is the largest one in the middle there, closest to the heart. And it is itself has a bunch of kind of contemplative and small spaces within it. It may be enclosed with a small fence or hedging. There's the fountain garden on the site of the current J. Austin Floyd fountain. There's a garden of reflection to the labyrinth on the right. So we'll show a view standing in the rose garden, maybe looking south, where you can see certainly lush planting, lots of hedging, but movable furniture, fixed seating, and maybe permeable areas to be in. The garden planting is more ornamental. I think it's inspired by the life and works of the former Lieutenant Governor Hillary Weston, and some of her kind of life and works. And I think it also helps us kind of achieve the maybe never delivered botanical gardens and kind of in the park. Dig into specifically the fountain, because the fountain exists today. It's hasn't worked, but we worked with Michael's team to learn about its provenance, and it was designed by J. Austin Floyd, a kind of a prominent landscape architect at the time. And I mean, pieces have been removed. It doesn't work today, and it wouldn't meet contemporary code. But the team is interested in kind of paying homage to it or referencing it within the new garden. So the fountain garden may exist kind of on that new fountain built to contemporary standards, would be sited kind of in the exact location of the current garden, then maybe kind of embed, and then with added, obviously, garden planting and seating. At the south is this garden of reflection, where we imagine this kind of reflecting pool at this quiet moment in the garden directly across from the legislature. And here, this is a kind of a close-up. You imagine if you walked up just to pause there. They're intended to be a deep pool. It's a thin layer of water that's allowed to reflect the legislature beyond if you wanted to choose to pause there. The workshop is something we've been working on and certainly had sort of feedback and questions about. So we've been working with JA Architects Studio to provide a feasibility report. So they looked at precedents around the world for things like this, and then looked at precedent for programs in the city or locally and abroad of what types of programs might be hosted in this kind of space. And the direction that it has gone is to look at a lightweight structure that does not have any kind of connections. So there's no sewer or water or anything. It's a light on the land structure that could house some small community programs. And the interest in these programs come from discussions with the cultural partners that kind of ring the site, the ROM, the RCM, the U of T, and the Gardner. And the thing that maybe we want to draw your attention to and kind of get your input on is what we called test fits, where the team looked at kind of different programs and how they might fit in this kind of 100-meter squared area. And there's this idea about maybe educational programs, clay workshops, rehearsal spaces, public talks, places for ceremony and Indigenous land-based programming. And I know this is a lot, but this board is also available in the room in the back corner and will be online. Moving to the heart. So we will look at, everyone knows our strategy of making space for people. Terrence will be happy to talk to you about the in more detail after the thing. You know about the statue and why we want to move it. It gets landed on the southeast corner. So it becomes maybe part of a gateway at the Queen's Park Crescent East and Wellesley Street, where it's brought down to grade and people can then sit on the plinth again and maybe look at the horse. Horse that it was bought for. Even the original donor said it was the horse, not the king, that he wanted. So you've seen this before, but this is what it could look like. This is what it looks like today. We open up the space for people, and we have the water feature, the cafe, the flexible performance space. I will maybe, do you want to do Council Fire?
So, and part of that move is to decolonize the park, is to move the king from this seat of prominence in the middle of the park that prohibits gathering and community the form in the middle of the park, and open it back up for that community to exist. And as part of that, we've integrated a fire pit. And I always like to try and be really clear that the fire pit isn't the council. The council fire refers to a full and the relation between landscape, culture, and governance. The fire pit's located in the middle with a heavy cover that's flush with grade on top of it to allow for community to use that space on a day-to-day basis. It's only removed through ceremony and protocol to allow learning of that fire pit for special uses such as National Indigenous Peoples Day, the Day of Truth and Reconciliation, or democratic events such as protests that might occur on site. And so it's meant to transform the site during those special moments to allow for ceremony, for protocol, and for Indigenous forms of governance to occur on the site when appropriate.
Thank you. So the heart, again, just from above, again, you see the cafe space on the right, the water feature is on the south, and the council fire is kind of in the middle. So we've showed this kind of grove concept of maybe a new view. When you're standing in the lawn, it now flows kind of more seamlessly into the middle where you can be kind of in the movable furniture among the trees. And we know that stuff happens here, like civic events happen here, a bunch of kind of impromptu events happen here, music events happen here. And I think it's important that we kind of recognize the stress that this puts on the park and just knowing that these things are expected to continue. So we counted 1,500 people at this kind of instance, but we've trying to provide a place that these kind of activities can overlap, but there's robust enough infrastructure to take pressure off the softscape when we can. Just very quickly, we kind of what it might be like on a typical day versus a small performance when there's maybe someone on the flexible platform and there's the audiences out to gather in the center, but the walkways are always there. And the same with the council fire event. It happens in the center, but there's space around it to move. The park remains accessible to those who want to come through and visit. The water feature is at the south of the heart. It's in kind of geology of Southern Ontario, and this is written on the board or written on the slides if people would like to read more about it, but it's intended to be interactive and have this possibly jets of water or fog production, and it may kind of, the level of animation could change throughout the day, and we're looking at, as we move into detailed design, making sure it's safe and kind of slip resistant and all the kind of requirements that it needs to meet there. So the cafe and washroom, shown kind of notionally here on the left, is located near the center. Would be located where people naturally want to gather, and we think it should be. It serves the park there, and we think we have a place that. So we're working on the ambitions for. We think it obviously should be robust, and it should be beautiful, and it should avoid impact, and it should be kind of as sustainable as possible. And we've engaged an architect, in fact, Sutcliffe Architects, who are kind of Order of Canada winners and multi gold medal RAIC winners, and are kind of known for their beautiful kind of approaches to placemaking and designing everything from handrails up to full scale buildings. There's no drawings to show. I mean, right now we're in the early phases of architectural design, but we can talk about why we think it should go where we're showing it. So we've been showing a idea of a building. It's like a kind of a shape to show about how much space is required, and we've been showing it where we think it can fit and where we think it should go. It's a place in the middle where people want to be, and it's where the bandstand and wash should be. They were popular with, in fact, it was in community and policing, I think, contributed to its eventual shuttering before being replaced eventually by the statue. But as you kind of trace the history of this site, you can see that the hardscape previously kind of extended further. There's no trees there, and then the large oak that existed there in 2023 is died and been removed. So there's essentially a clearing there, and we believe we can kind of both fit this building and service it sensitively without impacting those large mature trees. So there's maybe some small trees that get transplanted, like the yellow woods shown here, and there's maybe a small basement to put infrastructure for the park out of sight. But the existing mature trees to the right can stay in place. And when needed to, we kind of sensitively will investigate servicing connections, kind of subgrade and using whatever techniques we need to. We'll talk very briefly, or like we were happy to talk more in detail with you about the seating. We're looking at designing suites of furniture, both in stone and wood, that will kind of be a unified language for the park. We will look at lighting, and we'll be bringing on a dedicated lighting designer, but we're looking to provide, the right amount of light, but certainly directed where it needs to be and away from the kind of the ecological areas, and maybe have some kind of response and timed aspect. There needs to be an interpretation plan. So there's a lot of stories to be told here, and I think some of them are existing, like the Highlanders Memorial or Al Purdy, or the story of the statue, and some of them like the LGBTQ history and the Indigenous history need to be kind of written, and then somehow whether signage or QR codes or audio tours somehow made kind of legible to. So we'll put the park back in context. So today it connects all these important green spaces. It's the node in a much larger site. In our proposal, it maintains these connections. The pathways are still there. And looking towards the future, we're working with the University Park team who's working on a proposal to essentially close down Queens Park Crescent West south of Hoskin and allow U of T campus to flow from campus onto the park. And we're trying to coordinate and collaborate to make sure these two ambitious projects can go forward. So that's it. I'm just going to say thank you and pass it over to Nicole.